How is everybody doing? And welcome back for another Strength Chat episode. Today, I've got a very special guest for you all. Today, I'm joined by the owner and founder of Spartan Performance. Today, I'm joined by the one and only Jack Lovett. How are you doing?
Yeah, with an introduction like that first thing on a Monday morning, I'm doing pretty fantastic, thank you.
I'm available to do that. I can just announce that when you walk into the gym if you want, and I can just be like, right.
To be fair, you can. I'll get that recorded. I'll have it on my phone as well. That can be my answer message as well.
Yeah.
Excellent intro. I'm doing very well. How are you?
I am not so bad. Not so bad for a Monday morning. What's been happening in your world recently? Then what have you been up to?
I do get asked this question quite frequently, and it seems to be the same answer all the time. It doesn't seem to change. It's business. For myself, it's pretty much business. And there's a few facets to that. So obviously we have the gym, Spartan Performance, the actual in-person gym itself. And I won't lie, it is all-consuming. It's been all-consuming for 13 and 14 years that I've had it now. You know, it's a blur, but it is incredibly demanding. And there are pros and cons to that. And I freely admit that. So that is, a big factor of the time. But again, that's only one component of what goes on. So that's the in-person gym. Online coaching as well through something called Dominate Athlete, which has started to build up a lot over the last year, probably more so than I expected. But that does then take its time. And a little bit like yourself, so you might have the in-gym person, but you've got clients that are competing as well. So you've got the demands that way. And then obviously the intricacies that come with running a business because, again, I don't know if you've listened to maybe other podcasts I might have done in the past, but I'm quite open about my mistakes. I think that makes me a little bit unique. I don't mind admitting all the mistakes I made. And at one point, maybe a couple of years into when Spartan was open, we hit a very good groove. Things were going very well, very nicely. And I pushed cruise control because I automatically assumed that was just going to be the case moving forwards. And guess what? I got a rude awakening within about 3 months that, if you're not constantly striving, if you're not constantly working to make that happen or to continue that, then it isn't necessarily going to be so. So as well as the gym, the online, there's obviously the constant work to make sure that the gym is progressing. And I would say we're in quite challenging times for, both a gym and online as well. So pretty busy. Same answer as always, but busy.
A lot of things to keep you out of trouble. Then, now I know you've said there, obviously, with the gym, with the online coaching, obviously, the constant work in the background as well, and it was quite a brief introduction. I know obviously there's a lot more things that we can touch on, but for everyone listening who might not know your background, how Spartan came about, just want to give a little bit of a background to yourself.
Certainly, I'll give an abbreviated version. So this was not my initial vocation. This was not my initial profession. However, it was always a passion within my head. And the very short version was I wanted an amazing place to train at. I was an aspiring athlete or an athlete of some description. And my research then took me to the types of gyms and the types of training that really sort of caught my attention and kind of like aroused a passion inside me. And that was what I saw happening across over in the States. So I was looking across at the likes of Westside Barbell, Elite FTS was, kicking off about then. But I was drawn to a guy called Joe DeFranco. So I ended up going over and mentoring with a guy called Joe DeFranco in New Jersey on a very cold January. And you think I'd have learned my lesson from being from the very north of England, but I know what it's like in a cold winter. But no, I went and stayed for a couple of weeks in New Jersey in January, and I didn't take a coat. Now, if I thought it was cold where I'm from, it was freezing over there. But either way, I was drawn over there, went across, mentored, and ultimately, what I found was the type of warehouse facility that I was drawn to over in the States, that style of training, that ethos. There wasn't anything like it in the UK, so I may as well just build it myself. Which sounds pretty cool, but it could also be the world's worst business plan. But either way, I had a passion for this side of things, chose to then look to get myself qualified, then made sure that I spent some time. What I think is incredibly valuable is learning from those that are actually doing what you aspire to do, but more importantly, getting results. And, it was DeFranco that initially inspired me. There's plenty of others. So I spent my time over in the US there, came back and then decided to dedicate my life to making Spartan Performance what it is. And it's been pretty much head down since then. And at the same time, so I should probably suggest that I decided to try my hand at becoming a strongman as well. So my competitive strongman career, for what it was worth, began at exactly the same time that I decided to found I believe, no one's ever corrected me on this, and if I'm wrong, please someone speak up. I'm pretty sure I was the first warehouse style gym in the United Kingdom.
Yeah,
so
that's cool.
I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, I know. Especially, that's pretty cool. Going over to like Joe DeFranco's gym. He's a guy, a coach that I've followed for a while as well. In terms of that sort of, because you look at some of the gyms over in the US, and it's kind of like a bucket list of gyms that you would want to go over. Like you mentioned two there, Joe DeFranco's West Side Barbell. What sort of trying to create that in the UK? How did that what was the process to then build it up to start it, if you like, in terms of, equipment, space, how did that come about? Because it's not necessarily, yes, there's like strength and conditioning gyms when you're looking at sports teams and those sorts of things, but for a gym where sort of well, yeah, the average person could come in and be like, yeah, do you know what? Actually, I'm going to be able to train at this point. How did you start that process?
So, well, please interrupt me if I start to waffle on, because I can't talk for a while on this one. But I think I want to preface it with, yes, I was influenced by what I saw that went over in the States with DeFranco's, but I would like to think that I was smart enough to understand that was what was going on in his environment with the population that was there. Case in point, first day that I was there, literally, there was a queue around the block of parents just waiting to come into the office. And it was a very small warehouse. The first facility of Joe's that I went to, I've been back a couple of times and his facilities progressed, but only the one that I went to was, on the smaller side of things, amazingly impressive, but it wasn't huge. The amount of parents that were just basically coming in with the checkbook. How much? Right? Like basically, how do I get my child, how do I get my son and daughter into your program? Because they were committed for the long haul, because then they were going to, make a great college, get a college, hopefully a college scholarship, then make a professional team of some description. So the environment, the culture was much different anyway. But I was influenced to a degree, but when I came back, it was quite a challenge. Initially, when I tried to get onto an industrial estate, so where I'm located now, there was a brand new industrial estate, new units were getting built at this time. And it took me over a year to actually persuade the council to agree to a change of use. So for a year, I was rejected from all of the councils. So the industrial units were like certified. You could build aeroplanes in them, you could have heavy machinery, but oh no, don't bring a dumbbell in there, and rubber mats. Something dangerous could happen. So we had to go through that, daylight robbery, which is called change of use through the local authorities. You have to pay them an inordinate amount of money for them to deem it safe for dumbbells to go into the warehouse. But for the first year, they wouldn't even accept that. So it was quite a frustrating process, and I didn't think it was going to come off. And I firmly believe that the best type of facility is in a warehouse. In terms of its ground floor, there's plenty of space, because that to me is what makes a good facility. I'm not a fan of split levels of different rooms, partly for management and staffing, but also the overall look and flow that I want. But ultimately, it was a warehouse that I wanted, and it took me a good while to even get the local authority to then consider taking my money for me to pay them to potentially accept me in there. The landlord, they were very keen. The actual units that I went to, that estate sat empty for a year. I was the first tenant in there. But either way, it took me a while to jump through a few hoops, pay the money that was required to then be accepted for a warehouse. That was great. We had a date, and then it was a case of kitting it out. Now, obviously, I was influenced by Elite FTS because that was the kit that was in Joe DeFranco's place. Every time I read an article or I was looking, I think it was Eric Cressy had set up Cressy Sports Performance around about that same time. They wrote, basically everyone was shopping it. It was the same reason that I went for the CSCS certification initially, because I looked at everyone that I was influenced by and aspired to be like in the States. They had different backgrounds, but they all had one common qualification, which at the time was the CSCS through the NSCA. So, but also, they were all getting equipment from Elite FTS. However, the shipping costs, that was not going to work, because my business plan was not much better than what I came up with to you right now. And I certainly didn't have much finance behind me. Terrible credit rate as well, so I couldn't go and get a loan or anything like that. But only I shopped around and actually came across a company called Watson Gym Equipment.
Yeah.
And on their website, they were the only one that I came across that had a 45 back extension that looked similar to the Elite FTS one. But the website was pretty sparse. I reached out to the owner and said, look, I appreciate you make equipment on site. However, I aspire to something a little bit more. And the equipment that I've been used to in the States was just different level to what you see over in the UK. Is it possible we can maybe have a conversation? Maybe you could build them how I want. It was very accommodating. So I flew down to Bristol, had a tour of the facility. And I always give credit to Simon Watson, who's the owner of Watson Gym Equipment, because I think he did a great deal for me. He listened to me, listened to my ideas, and ultimately he's like, we can make whatever you want. So if we don't do it, we will make it. We'll make it to the standard. And he gave me a very good deal in terms of how I was going to pay for that initial equipment. Because again, I didn't have a big budget at all. So I had to be very selective in terms of the equipment that I wanted to go with. But at the same time, for me, I was in this for the long run. So it was key for me that the equipment that I had would last a lifetime. So even back in 2007, I was shipping bars in from Iron Mind. I think I had the Apollon's axle. They've got something called the Duffalo bar. They were like 750, 800 pounds back then, but they're still on my gym floor now. If you buy it correctly, you'll buy it once.
Yeah.
So interrupt me at any time if you want, but ultimately I identified the warehouse, identified somebody that could help me with the gym equipment. So then it was a case of the logistics, and then we kind of took the plunge. I got access to the facility maybe the second week in December of 2008, and we made the decision to open basically the beginning of January, the 1st or 2nd of January. Yeah. So we had about 2-3 weeks to transform the warehouse into what we wanted it to be. Yeah. And that was it, pretty much just full steam ahead, putting all the hours of the day in to do that. Again, shout out to Simon Watson. He actually drove up with his crew, and it was one of the worst. We're notorious for quite rough winters. So I'm based in a place called Concert. So it's about 20 minutes out of Newcastle upon Tyne. We're about 900 feet above sea level. So the snow can get quite high. So when Simon came that day, I think we had to dig him into the estate where the unit was. But either way, they helped fit the equipment. We made it work, and we opened with enough equipment for me to kind of kickstart my vision, so to speak. Yeah. And then it was all hands on deck and a fast learning curve.
Yeah, just on that, I've played rugby up at Concert, so I know all about.
Oh, really? You've been there, yeah.
Yeah. I've played rugby up there. Yeah, I know all about the weather. Yeah, sideways rain. I once remember playing in. I've never known how to like it before.
It's a unique climate.
That's it. So with that, because obviously, the first thing from there is that, when you mention about the equipment and the bars, you see all this, and in your head, I know I've thought about it as well. Oh, I'm going to get this, I'm going to get that. Whereas it's, the first thing you said there, the shipping costs to get everything over, it's not going to work, because ultimately it's got to be, it's a business at the end of the day. What is it? What's going to be able to then allow you to make, profit or break even or whatever from there. Obviously, from the December and then going into the January, how did you kind of balance, or what was your thought process? And why I ask this is, a lot of coaches, a lot of trainers will think, no, I'm going to open a gym. But equally, it's that balance between, if you're coaching, but then also getting staff, but then also running the business. How did you kind of strike that balance, and have you got more of a balance with that now, if that kind of makes sense?
Well, first up, if there are coaches listening to this podcast that are potentially looking to become gym owners, normally my first answer is don't. It is a completely different game. What I didn't realize, and maybe I should have, it was possibly very naive of me in the first place, that the second that gym opened, so where I wasn't working in a gym, when that gym opened, it was my name on all the bills, basically, I ceased to become a coach. And right back then, that was in the early days of my coaching career. So I was aspiring to be the best coach that I could be, but I didn't have a great deal of experience beneath my belt. Prior to going to the States, I was already coaching on the side. So whilst I had a separate career, I was coaching out of a martial arts gym. I was doing PT on running fields and things. So I was coaching, but my career was still at a very early stage. Yet the second that gym opened, I became a gym owner first and a coach second. And I didn't realize it at the time, as well as trying to become the best athlete that I could be as well. So it was a bit of maybe a strange mix, shall we say. So you need to be aware of that. And if you're curious you need to go and find gym owners that have done the things that you want to do. So one of the best things I did, again, was going across to Joe DeFranco's. That showed me some things, but again, that was the economy over in New Jersey and things like that. You need to go to either people like myself who have started independent gyms, and most importantly, that still maintain a successful independent gym. Yeah. Because many open, but almost as many close quite quickly afterwards. I take no set. I am a competitive individual, whether I'm in the gym, but also in business as well. So I want my gym to succeed. We feed first. However, it's great to see other gyms out there and flourishing. There's so many people out there. I think it's important that there are other gyms that can help people. I want to help people better, of course. But there's quite a few gyms that sprouted up in the aftermath from me, local, but also those that connected with me from around the United Kingdom. They're no longer here. They didn't even see the first year, the second year and stuff. So it's a brutal business. So please make sure you know what you're getting into. It can be incredibly rewarding, but it is massively challenging in different areas. And again, if you're getting this because you love being a coach and you're passionate about being a coach, the next step isn't always necessarily to then get business rates and rent and utilities and staff and tax and pensions and all that fun stuff, for want of a better word, that comes with it. But anyway, how do I strike the balance? I'm sorry I digressed on that one there. I basically had to make it work. This was the position that I put myself in. I was committed to it. I was opening a gym, and simply put, I was convinced that I can make the best type of facility, I use that term over a gym, in the United Kingdom, and I was going to make it work. So I would put in whatever hours it would take. I would educate myself, continuously. So it wasn't a case when I opened up that was it. No, I've pursued far more education from when the gym opened than prior to it opening. So whether that was courses, and, in this industry, qualifications, they have their worth to a degree, but I think a lot more of it is spent with who can you spend time with, learn with. The amount I've traveled around the world. I went and stayed with Derek Poundstone in Connecticut. I have been pretty much everywhere whilst running the gym at the same time. Yeah. You've got to do those things. And for me, it was a case of sink or swim. We had to open up at the beginning of January. Why? Well, because I'd already signed the lease with the landlord. And if I remember rightly, I got a month rent free. So the first 4 weeks, there was going to be no rent. So that was the time that I had to get all the preparations done, because then after that, there was a period of 50% on the lease. And if you want to talk about leases or anything like that for anybody that's interested in owning facilities, I'll happily do so, because landlords can be motherfuckers, for want of a better word. Even 14 years later, they always look after themselves first. But either way, I knew that was coming. I'd got a great deal from Watson. I mean, Simon still had a price and he still wanted to pay it, rightly so. But ultimately, I had a period of time where I knew, basically, after being open for a month, this is what my bills were going to be. After 2 months, 3 months. So I had to make it work. Yeah. And for me, that was a godsend, because I'm a task-oriented individual, and it made things very simple, sink or swim. That then helped me to be motivated to make sure that I got enough clients in, because I've used this example before, I think, in a recent article for British Strength magazine, and basically, when I opened my first facility, I had more 45 back extensions than I had clients. All right, and I only had two 45 back extensions. So, and here, that's another thing for aspiring gym owners. I started with too much equipment, even though I started with a small amount of kit. In hindsight, I actually started too big. But you live and learn these things. But ultimately, I had to hit the ground running. I had to make certain things work by a certain amount of time. I think there was some luck at play as well. It can't all be just down to my ingenious, business acumen, which certainly wasn't there. But what I lacked in business acumen, I believe I could back that up with a work ethic. I was willing to put that work in, and thankfully it came together.
Yeah. I think there's a couple of things from what you've said there. One, having too much equipment, and a couple of things from there. But two kind of follow-up questions from there. In terms of that development, obviously you keeping on top of your own development, traveling the world, learning, gaining that experience and knowledge. Do you think that the fact that that kind of helped with and you said there about work ethic, that helped with the business side of things, so that you could be like, right, I'm still developing from there, and that could help, because then you could refine and change it a little bit? And also the other side of that, is again touching on the work ethic, that the fact that, you know, putting that work in and developing a good reputation and kind of setting that standard. I know there's two questions there, but does that make sense?
I think so. So if I'm not answering what you want, by all means interject. Work ethic helped enormously, but I actually also feel that the fact that I was a startup business owner, even though I didn't realize it at the time, but I quickly learned that I was a newer coach, not new, but I was a newer coach, and I was hungry to establish myself.
Yeah.
If you know what I mean, I wanted to be a recognized name. Yeah. By that, what I mean is I wanted to be recognized for being able to deliver results for my clients. Not just, oh, people know my name, that's it. It's a case of I wanted to be known for delivering results. And I had a huge hunger to become the best possible athlete that I could become within strongman that I was competing. Now, you could say that those three endeavors would then be counterproductive towards each other. They were certainly counterproductive towards sleep. That's quite possibly why my face has aged in dog years since I've had the gym, yeah? But they helped each other, because the work ethic that I had to become the best athlete that I could become, well, that saw me leading by example on the gym floor. And that authenticity benefited enormously within the gym, because when I was opening Spartan and the type of training that we were doing, I'm not going to say specific to the UK, but to my region, I can remember, sorry, I'll just rewind. Prior to opening Spartan, when I had aspirations of doing so, I was training at a local gym, and I bought some blast straps, basically glorified gym rings from Elite FTS. I had a shoulder separation from rugby. I'd been looking to rehabilitate my shoulder, and I was using gym rings to perform push-ups on. I took them into the gym, attached them to the Smith machine. It's as if I came in with two heads on, or just decided to take a piss in the corner of the room. Everyone was looking, what the? They were looking over, they were puzzled, they were scratching their head. Should have seen it when I took a foam roller into the gym for the first time. You know, they was like, what is this? So this type of training that I had was completely different. You know, result-based strength training is our motto, our remit. Power racks, no machines, a lot of dumbbells, you know, potentially things that you and I maybe agree with. I've done my best I was actually familiar with your podcast prior to coming on, especially the type of guests that you've had on, but I've tried to get a picture of the type of training that you do with your clients, and compound movements, you know, then body weight's good, a glute ham raise, a reverse hyperextension. When people came, they weren't necessarily impressed when they saw the facility. Many could say that they felt intimidated. But if I've got that work ethic, if I'm putting in, 2, 3, 4 hours a day training on the gym floor, achieving through my sport, that helped to a degree have a level of authenticity. Then obviously, if you're leading by example, that helps you when you're coaching clients. It all just seemed to help each other. The sacrifice, the catch was it came at, no personal life and certainly no sleep. But at the time, that stage of my life, then that was a worthy sacrifice for myself. And I really don't know if I've answered your question there, so apologies.
Yeah, with that, because it is that thing, and I spoke about it with another coach during the week about a coach that I know, where different things will have an impact on different things. It's never just, I know sometimes it's good to be like, right, when I'm training, that's my training head, because obviously you'll have to wear different hats for that. When I'm doing business, that's my business head. On all those sorts of things. But it's that thing of, I think, I'm a big believer in things have a knock-on effect on other things as well. So if you're driven to be, successful at one thing, that has, it gives you that drive to do the other thing. However, at some point, it's a little bit like, I always go back to the analogy of, right, well, you want to get lean, or you want to get stronger. There's some sacrifices that have to be made from there to get to the end goal. And then when you get to that point, or where you're happy with where you're at, right, okay, so now I can, maybe hold back a little bit, or, change things from there. One thing that maybe a little bit of a tangent, but I think when you're talking about training, I think a lot of people are coming round to the idea of the strength training side of thing, rather than just machines and more gyms looking like that. When you went into the gym and we're doing it with your foam roller and those sorts of things, how did that I don't know what's the best how to say it, like carve out sort of, look, this is going to be this is going to get you results in terms of in terms of your training? Was there how did you find that?
Well, when it went into the gym with the gym rings and the foam roller, the type of gym that I was at, they all just thought I was a lunatic. Now, that was wrong. I misspoke there. They certainly didn't look convinced with what I was doing. It deviated from chest and arms and, chicken and rice type of thing, 5 times a day or whatever. It was different, okay? And granted, I didn't have a great deal of conversation with everyone in there, so maybe some people thought it was a great idea. This is just the opinion that I've built up in my mind. But I was lucky to have, some friends, some training partners around me that obviously, once they started to train with me, and this was again before Spartan, they could see the benefits to that. And I was exposed to a book called Dinosaur Training by Bruce Kuby. And once I got that hit a nerve, not hit a nerve, it resonated deeply within me. That style of things. So from that point, I was getting sandbags. I had my friend who was a welder. He was making farmers walks and sleds. This was maybe 2004, 2005. So doing those sort of things, I couldn't do them at the gym I was training at, but I was doing them outside on the running track. So then I was building up some people, not a lot, but the people that were using them, they were kind of buying into the intrinsic benefits of the odd object style training and that sort of thing. But it didn't really transpire in terms of convincing people until actually Spartan was open. And then when Spartan was open, we made many mistakes. And again, I can mention the work ethic. Yes, that was there, but that's not unique to me. There's plenty of people with a work ethic. But the key point was, right from the outset, the programs that we were delivering and the sessions that we were coaching, they were delivering results. And then that became the best form of advertising, because then that was spreading throughout the local community. When I opened, I certainly wasn't the cheapest gym. I don't believe I was most expensive, but it wasn't like when I opened and I looked around at all the other gyms, which is what tends to happen. They all charge £30, but I'm charging £20, and then that's a race to the bottom. I knew that I had to have a certain level of value. I believe I undercharged when I first opened up. You learn those. In fact, I think I undercharge now even. But it was the fact that we got results, that the programs, and we didn't initially offer programs. So I came from a coaching background, but I wouldn't actually start charging for program. I'm a big believer that you've got to be able to walk the walk and talk the talk. And you've got to have a track record. Before I will deliver a service, I need to make sure that I've got a nice resume behind me proving that works. Mm-hmm. So obviously I was learning program design. I was designing the programs for myself. That took me to a couple of British titles in natural strongman. Not every one of my clients was strongmen, though, so that doesn't make me great at the average Joe, the average Jane. But again, learning more, continuing my education from a program design element, then doing a lot of free training. So I did a lot of free training, basically a lot of complimentary sessions, then taking on guinea pigs. But ultimately, you build up enough for me, it's important. I need to be authentic. It's very important that I'm authentic and I can say, look, this is what I believe. This is the evidence I can back it up with. Then I would move into offering, program design that people could have. And ultimately, those programs were effective. Would I do them differently now? Yeah, of course, because obviously we progress, we learn. A lot of the tenets of my program now are very similar to back then, but hopefully, there's some improvements. But ultimately, it was down to the results. We got the results. People were telling the friends would come back. And again, within the gym business, whether people are taking out a membership, is the contract even binding? Even if they buy 20 PT sessions a week, they might not buy any more after the first week. The key thing for me, which has always been in business, is my focus on retention.
Yeah.
So we don't have the biggest membership at Spartan, we never have, but I take enormous pride. Potentially now, I don't know. We have clients here that have been with me 14 years. So they've been with me through 5 facilities, and that in itself, is worth an enormous amount. But I'd like to think that that's a testament to the quality of their programming and coaching. Ultimately, you've got to deliver results. If you do, then people will come, and then success can build from there if you then continue correctly.
Yeah, I think that's cool. I think the fact that, like what you said there, if you've had members that have stayed with you through 5 facilities, obviously they're getting what they want for it. It's that thing of, I'm a big fan of an analogy, so it's a little bit like there's a reason why you still go to that coffee shop down the road. It's because, do you know what I mean? The
Starbucks experience. That's from the book, The Starbucks Experience. So I read that book. Starbucks want to be the third place for their clients. So that's their business model, one of their business models, which is you've got work, you've got home, and then you've got Starbucks. That's what they're built around. That's exactly what I wanted Spartan to be.
Yeah.
The clients, the members that are here, they will have work, they will have home. If Spartan is not their third place, yeah, then they are not going to stick with us. Now, 14 years, I would like to think, is maybe the exception as opposed to the rule. We have a very high retention rate. I haven't checked this month, but we were right around 96, 97%. We've actually dropped a little bit in the new year. But normally we're very high 90%, right the way through my entire history of Spartan. And that matters to me. So we track those sort of metrics. But we have to be that third place for the client. And if we can't be that, then it's unlike the lifetime of that client is going to be somewhat shorter. And my business model is very much built around retention of clients and, bluntly speaking, getting more from that client, as in there are extras that you can buy for being a member at Spartan, whether that you can buy extra PT, whether they buy the clothing, maybe they invest in supplements or the meals that we do downstairs. Ultimately, their spend on a monthly basis becomes higher than just the membership itself. But in order to achieve that, we need to be their third place.
Yeah, and I think that's, again, this might be a little bit of a tangent, but you can see how you were saying it there. You can see that, you know, it matters to you, like everything that you've just
really
mentioned
does.
there. And as well, I think sometimes and this is something that as I've developed and learned, and you know, it's not necessarily a bad thing if members are then doing more and trying to get more out of that member, because, you know, if they're wanting those other things, it's because they're buying into, you know, what it is that you're doing, because that's going to be much better than, you know, them staying for a while and then leaving and just dipping in and out of it. One thing when you said there, one thing that was going through my head as well is a couple of weeks ago, I don't know whether you've seen the film, it's called The Founder. The guy who well, he didn't make McDonald's, but the guy who like owned McDonald's, and he was on about in the film they make like the franchises, but the standards in terms of other McDonald's weren't as good, so they didn't keep to the systems and the formulas and those sorts of things. One thing that I was saying from there, obviously you've said there, you know, the retention, you know, a standard, creating a reputation. How did you find that with other coaches coming on board? Because sometimes it's a case of it doesn't always go, go right. You know, sometimes they want to do their own things. You know, and I know I've had conversations where it's not always agreeing on the best way to do it, but ultimately it's got to be the best for the client, for the facility. How did you kind of find that over the years?
Staffing has been the single most challenging thing that I've experienced throughout the entire time of having my business. And it continues to be so. It's important to note that just because it's a challenge now doesn't necessarily mean that that's a negative reflection on the coaches that I have working with me presently. But there are always challenges with staffing, especially now and moving forward. However, historically, that has been the biggest challenge bar none. And a lot of that can be a reflection on myself. I didn't come in here as, manager of the year, owner of the year. I would have made mistakes myself. However, it's a real challenge. And I can go into this in as much depth as you want. So by all means, again, come in with questions. But to answer the initial ones that you had, one thing that I've done differently to the vast majority of facilities that I'm aware of, and obviously I'm really pleased that I've built up a lot of good connections. I like to build relationships with the gym owners. As much as I'm competitive at the same time, if I succeed, in my opinion, they should be succeeding, because if I can raise the standards of our industry, they could do so. And I've made some brilliant friends over the years, around the country and even the world in different gyms. But not all of them salary their coaches. So from day one, all of my coaches have been salaried. I don't take on, self-employed PT or anything else like that. To me, one of the downsides to that, is the fact that, let's say, for argument's sake, I've got Spartan now. I would say it's pretty much got everything that any coach would ever need in terms of tool, educational resource, or whatever, to deliver a result. So I'm going to get 10 PTs in. What do? Do we charge them a rent per month? I'm not entirely sure how it works with them. But then what you've got is in my mind, 10 individuals with maybe 10 different training styles, 10 different levels of professionalism. And that's a big word for me. Attitude, enthusiasm is key for me. Authenticity, I mentioned already, but professionalism. I demand that from myself. I pride myself. I fucked up many times in business, but I firmly believe that I have been implicitly professional at all times since I've had Spartan. It was something that I decided from the outset, and that's also had some negative impact. But at the same time, I believe that, I was always professional, and I demand that. I expect that from the coaches that work with me. Hence some problems that I may have had. Now, if I go down the self-employed route, potentially different ideas, that to me just didn't work. So if the angle that I want, to me, Spartan is a family. Spartan is the brand. It's not Jack Lovett on the name of the door. It's not Jack Lovett coaching. It is Spartan. So when people come, we have an ethos of training. We have our systems. We have our philosophies. Doesn't matter what coach you work with in Spartan, you will be coached on those philosophies. Now, of course, they can have their own identities. You've had one of my ex-coaches on, Jenny Todd. So, great coach that worked for me. Thank you very much, Jenny. She did some great work for me over the years. She came to me as a client first, so I have a lot of respect for Jenny. But they have to fit within that. And that's how I went about managing it. And that came with its pros, but also its cons.
Yeah, I think that's a phrase that the professionalism and that I think isn't always it's maybe not always associated with coaching, because I think sometimes people have a lot of horror stories about how things that have been done. And I know with the so basically, long story short, I changed gyms and I moved. I now manage a gym that've got a site in Wetherby.
Okay.
And I manage one in Guiseley now. And across the board, it doesn't matter whether you go to Wetherby, the Wetherby site, or the one in Guiseley. The standard is always the same. And I've actually really enjoyed helping the coaches and the trainers maintain that standard. I know sometimes with that there's sometimes difficult conversations of, look, this is the standard that we have to be at. But do you find that actually when the staff that you've taken on, they buy into it a little bit more, and it's like that production line of, right, well, they want to develop, they want to get that work ethic, and then everything, then you can scale a little bit more or develop a little bit more by keeping that retention of members, if that makes sense.
Well, that type of attitude, that type of hypothetical staff member, I'm going to call it a team member. I don't have staff. I want team members. Yeah. I want colleagues. That is the dream for me. That is the type of person that we want. Way back in the day, I made a big mistake. I hired for qualification. That's what I first looked for, which is not what I would go for now. To me, I look for attitude, enthusiasm. That's the ones I'm looking at, because let's be honest, what we do, or at least what I do at Spartan, it's not rocket science. Not reinventing the wheel here. I've got my book, Spartan Strength, out there, and one of the big problems I had when I was speaking with my editor at the time, I was like, it's almost like I feel like a fraud, because everything I'm putting out, there's no super Spartan secret in there. I'm doing, he's going to kill me. I'm no good at promoting the book. I didn't invent barbells or dumbbells or the compound lifts. Yes, I've got methods that I use with them, and I like to show the things that I've found effective in my environment over the years. But in reality, what we do, there's no real secrets. Right? It's not that hard what we do in terms of the technique side of things. Yeah. However, everything comes down to that attitude. And in the past, I didn't hire for that. And then ultimately, I suffered because whilst I might have had skilled coaches, I didn't have the one, not always, because I have had very good members of staff that have worked with me, but not across the board have I had ones with the correct attitude. And needless to say, whether their careers with me or their careers in general might have no longer exist within this industry. What I would argue that I'm blessed with now, and I'm not going to disparage the skills of my current coaching team, but I think they've got an excellent attitude, they've got excellent enthusiasm, and they're constantly wanting to improve themselves, and I certainly fucking hope so. They better want to be upskilling themselves. I can't be the most passionate in the room about, constantly learning, constantly striving. That's what we want, and that to me makes a more successful team, delivers a better product within the gym. So yes, we can scale it to a degree. It's actually what you mentioned there. You had two sites, and you mentioned that the quality in both is equal across them. That's fucking awesome. Really is. Like, my hat's off to you on that. Over the years, I've had, not a lot, but I've had quite a few options to franchise Spartan. So they were looking at putting in Leeds. There was one going to Glasgow, no, Edinburgh, sorry. And one of the things that put me off the whole franchising was the quality control. Because, you know, the amount of problems or the issues that I've had enabling to make sure, like right now, I'm upstairs in our office doing this podcast with yourself. Downstairs, we've got 2 coaches working. We've got a full client timetable. The gym is open anyway, so we have an open gym alongside a client timetable. Classes, private, semi-private. I need to be comfortable that that standard downstairs is exceptional, whether I'm on the gym floor or not. Over the years, that's proven a challenge. So to me, I wasn't confident. Maybe that was a reflection on myself that I could manage that on multiple sites. So if you pulled that off, full credit to you.
Yeah, I can't take full credit. There's the owner of the gym, so I'll shout out to Ed on that. But yeah, I think with that, you know, you touched on it before that, you know, having that building relationship with other gym owners, coaches, it just raises the standard of everybody, you know, a little bit, and in terms of an industry, which I think is key, because again, maybe a bit of a tangent, but because there's so much information out there and all those sorts of things, sometimes it can be actually quite hard to be like, you know, it's not necessarily always the person that's shouting the loudest that is putting the best things out from there. You also mentioned about, you know, changing facility 5 times as you've changed. In terms of how the systems that you've put in place, or how was that refined over time? And is it going to be a case of that's always going to be refined, so it might change and adapt and adjust, or is it actually just the systems that you use as opposed to the facility that might change going forward?
Okay.
As well?
Well, with the facility upgrade, and it was simply put, we started small, but still in hindsight bigger. I think it was about 3,000 square foot. More than enough space to get the job done for a sufficient amount of people to make that business successful, if you know what you're doing. I could have started even slightly smaller, and I'd have had a lower rent, I'd have had lower business rates. Little heads up for all those coaches that want to be business owners, don't forget about business rates, okay? So I would have started with lower overheads. But ultimately, 3,000 square foot then transpired into 7,000, ultimately we're into like 10, maybe 11,000 square foot now. We've got bigger over time. That was dictated purely based upon the fact that our client base was building up, and, you know, we needed that extra space. So we went there. The systems, of course, have had to improve, not just to accommodate the bigger facility, the bigger staffing. So I have 3 full-time coaches to work alongside me right now. By Spartan standards, that's not a lot of coaches, but that's the most amount of coaches we've had at any one time. So the business has got bigger, the premises have got bigger, the roles, the duties have got bigger as well. So the systems need to improve. Some of them have stayed the same, but obviously we've had to refine them over the years, and they are constantly refined. And this is genuine. Every Monday, 1 or 2 p.m. is a team meeting. So I'll get down with all my coaches. That's when we simply look at refining what we're doing as a business, our systems. So they are constant. My systems are refined on a weekly basis. Yeah. But over the years, of course, they've been refined on that one there. So whether that's initially, and for a good period of time, I was responsible for everything. So that would have been obviously coaching the coaches, coaching the clients, program design. Then as we went on, we've introduced something called a gym trial. So it's a 28-day trial of the gym as opposed to having to sign into a longer-term contract. That trial comes with its own assessment, then its own program. Ultimately, I was ended up doing everything. You learned, or you need to be able to delegate those tasks to different people, have better systems in place so that my time can be used more efficiently. One of my biggest mistakes was I spent all of my time in the business for a period of time as opposed to being able to spend my time on the business. And ultimately, the ability for the business to develop and progress is going to be hindered by that. So the systems have needed to get better that way so we could scale. So again, you need systems to accommodate more staff. And that could just be, you know, how do we insert team training? Well, I've got to have that on a weekly basis. What about individual? Well, then I need to make sure that I've got meetings on a weekly basis with my coaches so that we can speak one-to-one. You know, the things that you would discuss as a team are going to be different than what you discuss one-to-one. But then obviously the systems, you know, who's responsible for the trial program? Does that program evolve over the time? Because my programs, whilst very similar, I'd like to think I've learned and obviously educated myself as a coach from other authorities over the years. But as well as that, the truth can be the true test bed is what happens on our gym floor.
Yeah.
Because I've got thousands upon thousands of clients logged all of their data. I don't know, is it hundreds of thousands of PT hours by now, between all the coaches over the years? That data needs to be checked. The programs then obviously refine themselves, but then obviously the equipment range, the space. So yes, the systems do need to evolve. We want it to be more efficient. One, it makes it for a better business, or it helps it become a business in the first place. Just because you're open doesn't mean that you have a business. In my opinion, the business is one that's obviously making money, but it has systems in place. And you mentioned with McDonald's there, so you alluded to, I think it's Michael Keaton, is he in the film? I think I've seen the trailer for the film. I haven't seen the film. But again, this was something I looked at Starbucks. Doesn't matter which Starbucks you go to on planet Earth. I don't know the drinks to do too well. A fucking frothy coffee with ice cream on the top. It doesn't matter which one you go to. It's always the same. It's not like, oh, well, I like this coffee from that Starbucks because that Starbucks doesn't do the same thing. Or with McDonald's, a Big Mac. There's a Big Mac. Doesn't matter wherever you go. It's a pile of shit. You should go to Five Guys, but there you go. Even in Five Guys, burgers are better. But you need to have that uniform quality across the board. We need systems for that. And for myself, you have to develop systems as a business owner to run the business, as well as systems within the business to then obviously manage on the gym floor.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a really good points to make, because I know with sometimes people are thinking, oh well, having meetings week to week, what can change in a week? Whereas actually, there's a lot of things can change. A week is a long time, and as well, there's going to be things coming up that you think, right, well, how do we deal with this? How do we deal with that? Because especially if going back to when you said there about members who have been there for 14 years, I think the longer that members are there, they're a good gauge to let you know if things are going really well or dropping off. Because if they've been there a while and if things aren't quite right, I think, or I like to think that members are a really good gauge of they'll give you a little bit of feedback if they're if they're not happy with things or if things dropped off from there. So yeah, I thought there was some good points on there. One thing that I also wanted to touch on, and this is kind of going back to the training side of things in terms of equipment and thought process around training. There seems to be at the minute that strongman training is becoming quite popular, obviously with like in Leeds, it's at the First Direct Arena. I remember going to go see World's Strongest Man when it used to be at Headingley Stadium. It wasn't even wasn't even inside. And do you think that is that something that with the strongman, obviously yourself competing in strongman, that you've always done, or is it something that you've kind of added in as you go? Because you've spoken there about the business side of things, that there's an expectation that people will think, yeah, there may be no barbells, there may be no dumbbells, but then you throw into the mix, why is there some big concrete balls in the back of in the back of the corner, or a log or something like that? Is that something that you've kind of developed a little bit or always looked at? What was kind of your thought on that?
So odd objects, we'll call them.
Yeah.
Strong woman's probably as popular, if not more popular than strong man right now. Yeah. I know it's the same thing, but to me, it's odd object training. Now, odd object training has been in my own training prior to Spartan. I alluded to the fact that I got dinosaur training. So for those listening, if you haven't read Dinosaur Training by Brooks Cuthbert, you've got to check it out. Ultimately, that is the history of barbell training, and you can see there's nothing new in training. So if you're looking at, inch dumbbells, they're quite popular within the strength community right now. They've been around a while. Check the history of the inch dumbbell. Yeah. So odd objects have always been my passion. In fact, I didn't really start with a traditional gym training background. So I grew up working on farms. I was lucky enough to go to a very good school in Newcastle, so the Royal Grammar School. They had great sport teams. We used to have like an off-season program for the summer holidays to train in the gym. I never followed that. I was too busy working at farms. Yet when we went back every season in to get tested, I'd grown probably the most. Probably helped that I was getting paid in milk at the time, and I was well fed. But grown. Odd object training is a big part of my history, big part of my identity. When I was watching strongman on television, so I'm looking at John Paul Sigmarsson. In fact, very close to his death, maybe a few months prior to his death, he actually opened a supermarket in Consett, and he pulled a truck in the car park. I still got the picture, so I was there as a little kid, pulling trucks, Atlas stone, flipping tires. That resonated with me. So then when you read Brooks Cubic Dinosaur Training, that became a massive part of my own training. So that was an identity of my own programming coming into opening up Spartan Performance. By that point, then I was exposing myself. And back then, I would argue that odd object training was just as well known within the industry if you were into the strength side of things. I was a big fan of Iron Mind in terms of the product, but they had a great magazine, Iron Mind magazine. There was plenty of people out there doing that style of training. So that was in my programs from day one. But you can water that down for general population. Every one of my clients, barring significant injury, will do farmers walks or loaded carries. It is a cornerstone of my program. I think it should be a cornerstone of everybody's program, but there's many ways to be able to perform it. You look at World's Strongest Man competitors, that is completely different. Their job is to move a very heavy object, an unreasonably heavy object, that's most likely not the shape that it needs to be for carrying. It needs to look good for television, right? So it's probably even worse. They need to move that from point A to point B as fast as possible. That's it. However, the benefits of loaded carries can be a lot more profound than that. So, but you can scale it. You can carry a 1 kilo dumbbell. You can carry a 2, 3 small kettlebell. So odd object training has been within my programming and training and the gym itself. The very first Spartan, we had tires out the back that we were flipping. Now we've got the wrong size tire because we were just learning. We were striking sledgehammers off them. We were making sandbags. My friend made the first prowler. The gym where we had, so we were pushing the prowler down the street. There were sparks coming off it because it was on the tarmac. So yes, it has always been a part of my programming. I would say within myself, it's been just as popular now. What's more popular, I feel, is strongman itself as a sport. There's a greater awareness, especially through social media. But then you could look at the CrossFit Games. You know, they've got sandbag components. They're pushing prowlers and sleds now. That's bringing odd object training to the masses. It's always been a part of what we've done. And I freely admit, it's just because I loved it. That's why I started doing it. That's why I initially put it in there. But obviously over the years, you learn the benefits to a multitude of clients as well. Because I think it's a key point worth noting. If my business solely relied upon the money that it brought in from training professional strongmen and women, or even professional athletes, we would have closed a long time ago. Yeah. You know, we've trained those that have been to the very top in the sport of strongman, whether that's the Arnolds, whether that's worlds, whether we've got European champions, British champions, English champions, whatever. We've got a huge resume of clients that have succeeded in that. But for every one of those, there's 30, 40, 50, 60 average Joes, average Janes. However, odd object training, strongman style training features to some degree. The vast majority of my clientele will do carries, will pull sleds, and will push prowlers. To me, that is strongman training.
Yeah, and I think, and I wanted to ask that. I wanted to ask that question because I know what you've said. You know, you said there, you know, that's been involved in your training since day one, and it is that thing of with anything with social media, and I think I know Strongman have their own channel now, so you can keep up to date with their training. Same as CrossFit, just because I think it's more in the public eye. And you know, I use the example of going to Lee's First Direct Arena. You know, all of a sudden that doubles the amount of people for going there, because I know the Headingley Stadium has been done up now, but it was before it got done up. It was just in one side. I remember watching it there, just on the just on the rugby pitch. So as it develops and grows, it's not necessarily anything new that's out there in terms of training. They've always been around, but it's like with anything, as soon as the spotlight's on it, it goes from there. And what I also liked what you mentioned there is, when you're talking about, you know, that odd object training, even though you might have world, European, you know, British, English title winners, I think it's cool, or what people are now buying into, I think, is that they're doing in some shape or form a variation that the people that they're seeing on telly or they're seeing win. And I think that buys a lot more, that gets a lot more buying on them, because ultimately, you know, like what you said, if you're enjoying that odd object training, it's fun. You know, you go to the gym and then you build up from there. Quite a lot of topics and tangents thrown in there, Jack. Really enjoyed what we've chatted about. But the last question, you may know the last question that I always like to ask, but what would be, from everything that we've spoken about there, from a business side of view, a training point of view, what would be your take-home points or words of wisdom?
Depends on the audience. Am I speaking to coaches, gym owners, or people that train in the gym?
Let's go coaches and people training in the gym.
Okay, coaches first. Professionalism. You need to be professional. And that is how you conduct yourself across the board. I can't recommend that enough. As an employer myself, it is a quality that I look for, but it's all one that will serve you very well indeed, whether you work for me, work for somebody else, or even just lead your own career yourself. It's so important for that. And be incredibly humble. There are always new things to learn. So never stop learning. You've got to continuously sharpen your knife. So it doesn't matter how successful you become, doesn't matter how great the results that you're getting with your clients right now. Don't be so narrow-minded as to think that you can't learn from others. Okay? And even if you go there, and I've been to many a seminar in the past, and I've heard people come away, well, that was a load of shit. That was, what a waste of time. Now, to me, I could at least say, well, I came away knowing what not to do. There's always something that you can take from it. However, every seminar that I've ever been to, I've came away with at least one nugget that I could use. So be professional, because I think that is something that this industry lacks enormously. It is not a well-regulated, if at all regulated industry. Professionalism is incredibly low, so it gives it a bad name. We've never been more needed by society. If you look at the current obesity rates, and not to dwell on it too much, so I don't want to hijack your podcast, but I think we can all agree that being healthier and more physically robust is probably, in our own best interests, especially in the recent history and current climate. We can do so many good things for the population that's out there. But if we're not professional, if we're not constantly educating ourselves, then we can't do that. So that's for coaches. For general gym owners, I could come with motivation and discipline. Motivation is great, it's exciting, it's sexy, it gets you to the gym in January, typically the January rush, but it's fleeting. Yeah, it's discipline that you require to keep turning up to the gym when motivation is gone. If you want to achieve whatever goals you have, you're going to have to tap into discipline more so than motivation. So please look into that. And the fact that you are training in the gym already makes you a friend of mine, because I have enormous respect for people that put their physical health and well-being into their own hands and go about it. And I suppose I should finish that if I can help anybody, whether that's coach or individual, then you can reach out to me. I'd be delighted to help you.
Awesome. I think there was some really good take home points there, and some practical takeaways. I think there was some good points there that we've spoken all the way through, which has been really, really good. Thanks a lot, Jack, for taking the time to jump on. If anyone does have any questions about what we've chatted about, see the content information that you put out there, that Spartan puts out there, where can people find you or reach out to you?
The best ways would be through social media, namely Instagram. So you can follow myself. We'll be able to put the link up. So my Instagram handle is Jack Lovett. The link should be up there. You can follow what I do, though granted, I am not the most savvy when it comes to social media, so I'm not posting as frequently as I should be. However, if anyone's listening, interested in what I've had to say today and would like to ask me a question, if you drop me a DM, I will come back to you. So if anyone's got any questions that way for me personally, whether that's business, training related, reach out, I will come back to you. If you want to see what goes on at Spartan, which has a far better Instagram page than my own, then check out Spartan Performance. That's the gym. That will give you an idea of what's going on. Coaches, gym owners, anybody, you don't need to be a member to come to Spartan. If you ever wanted to come, it's worth the trip, even if you can get through the snowed concert. So you can check that one out there. And finally, as well, because ultimately Spartan is in person, I do offer group and one-on-one online coaching through something called Dominate Athletes with a good friend of mine and colleague, Tom Hamilton. And that is a pretty awesome way to be able to get educated in a variety of ways on my style of training, Tom's style of training, and not necessarily be able to access in person. That's called Dominate Athletes. But ultimately, if you reach out to any of those particular channels, I would be delighted to help anybody that did so. I will always take the time to respond.
Awesome. All those links will be in the episode notes. 100% check them out. Really appreciate you taking the time to jump on. Really, really enjoy chatting with you today. Thanks a lot to everyone listening, and I will see you all next week.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.